Hi guys, welcome back to another episode on Piscator UK. Well, it's another glorious day here in Scotland on the banks of Loch Lomond, and I want to do this episode pretty much on the back of last episode when I fished this exact spot. I fished most of the day with the feeder, and near the end of the session I fished a slider float and I did really well, probably casting 25 to 30 metres out, and I had some really good roach which were close in, which is I thought was unusual for this time of year. You know, it's not even April yet, so I thought I'd come back here today and concentrate on the slider float and show you guys how I fish the slider float, how I set it up, how I bait the swim, and see if I can come up with some nice looking fish. And I'm going to get ready to bait up the swim for the slider float. I've got a feeder out just now. I thought I'd just try and fish short for the last hour. The ground bait I'm going to be using for the slider line is pretty much Dynamite Silver Roach Original. Quite a bit of breadcrumb in it, which gives a nicer consistency to hold the bait balls together. As you're firing them out with a catapult, you want them to withstand the impact, and I'm probably fishing in about 17 feet of water, and you want it to get to the bottom intact before it starts breaking up, along with the other loose particles, which I've got some tinned hemp and dead red maggots. And that's the bait I've got today. Is I've got live red and dead red in the ground bait, and there's a little bite on the feeder. First one. Oh, and this feels like a nice fish. Literally third cast with the feeder, and I thought I'd cast a bit shorter than the last time, purely because I was getting the nicer fish close in. What an excellent way to start the session. It's knocking on the pound mark. What an absolute beauty. Shining in the Scottish spring sunshine. Awesome. We'll get this guy in the keep net. Brilliant start. And we'll get baiting this slider line in a few minutes. I'll get recast out with this. May as well be fishing while I'm waiting. And plus, the reason I thought I'd just bang a feeder on is I'm actually going to wait about 45 minutes before I start fishing the float line. I thought I may as well have something to do. Right guys, it's time to bait up the slider line, and I'm going to be using a Drennan ground bait catapult. This is the strongest one. I think you can get 40 metre with this. Now, I've already made up 10 or 11 balls, hand size balls, which have just got the dead maggots in it and the ground bait that I mentioned before. So what you need to do, guys, you need to cast out first, find your line, find your distance, which is most important, and then you'll be ready to start baiting the slider line. Get the rod ready to go. I've already plumbed up. And that's a float settled on my far bank marker. and it's roughly 27 metres out. Get your bait ball in your catapult ready. And then you just want to try a consistent pull back. All the balls are exactly the same size, so you should get consistency in the flight. And you're not going to get them all down the same hole, but a good spread of bait, roughly about the size of maybe 3 square metres. And you'll notice that the balls are sort of barrel shaped, because if they were round, then the catapult would just destroy them. So I think this is the 9th or 10th ball. And there's a fish on the feeder. And that's baiting up for the slider line. Pretty simple. Like anything, it takes a bit of practice just to get the distance for the ground bait balls. But the main thing is having your distance set first on the float, as that's where you're going to be consistently casting. Another stunning roach. No small ones yet, which is good. Perfectly hooked. Absolutely beautiful. Like I said, that's about 9 or 10 balls on the slider line. I'm going to leave that probably half an hour, 40 minutes before I check it. Just continue with fishing the feeder as I'm getting fish, and then we'll be ready to go on the slider line. But the fishing at the moment is absolutely tremendous. Awesome stamp of fish. While I've got this float rod in, I'll just explain what it is I'm using. So I've got a 13-foot float rod, and it's the Drennan Red Float. So 13 foot is a really good all-round float rod, and it's got a nice progressive action. It's got a nice soft tip, but not too soft because the slider floats are quite heavy. I've got a Preston Inertia, and that's a 320. Some people like a 4000 size reel for slider float fishing, but the 320 is got quite a large spool size, so that's why I stuck with the 320 for this. And that's loaded with 6 pound 0.22 diameter mono. And guys, for slider fishing, you don't want to go on the expensive route for the mono. You just want a bog standard nice hard wearing line, reasonable diameter, because slider float fishing can be prone to tangles, and most people get into tangles because their main line is too light. So you need a substantial weighted line that's durable and quite stiff. That's why if you go for a more expensive one, a thin diameter line, you're probably going to end up with problems. £6 mono all the way through to the business end, and coming down, this comes to a small bead, and your top bead, it's important that the eye that the line goes through is quite a small diameter. If you get beads that are too large a hole, it's just going to slide past your stop knot. Then goes on to my float. This is a 3+8 gram Daiwa sliding float, and I think it's an awesome bit of kit. It's got 3 grams of weight in the nose, so it's a loaded float, and this is the slimline insert. You get a couple of inserts with it. You get an orange one, you get a yellow one, and it's worthwhile maybe trying to find some different tips with the same diameter so that you can maybe colour some in black, you know, so that you can see the presentation on the water a bit better. I've then got another bead, and the second bead, the lower bead, that just protects the slider float as it's casting through the air, protects the slider float from hitting the first knot, which is onto a small micro swivel, and that's just tied on with a uni knot. I've then got approximately 4 foot, 3.5 foot of 6 pound fluorocarbon, and I've got a 5.5 gram Olivet. Below that I've got a series of styles, and the reason I put styles on, it sort of creates a little boom, and this really helps to minimise tangles. It may seem a little elaborate, you know, all these styles on it, but I really find that it helps to minimise tangles. So like I said, it's a 3+8 gram, so 5.5 gram Olivet, and the rest of the weight, or the 8 grams, is made up in the styles. Then go down to through the 4 foot or 3.5 foot length. I've got 8 number 8 stots, and that's just my dropper shot. I've got a quick change swivel, a sort of medium quick change swivel, and a swivel's really important because you're casting at distance, and if you bring in, you know, maggots, etc., you're just going to get line twists, which is going to lead to tangles as well. And I've got a 12 inch 30 centimetre 4 pound fluorocarbon hook link, and I'm using the same hook that I've got on the feeder rod, which is a Preston N40 size 16. That is the slider float set up in its entirety, and obviously the depth set by a stopper knot, which obviously hits the first bead. Got 2 stopper knots, and you'll notice the tag ends are left intentionally long. Like I said, one set of tags is about 2 inches and the second is about 3 inches, and it just so I can differentiate between the 2 stopper knots, and so that I can adjust them should they come a little bit slack. But 2 just as backup. Some people just use the 1, but I'm using 2, and if one should come loose, at least the other one's in place. And obviously I've got a reference point between my hook keep to the stopper knots for the depth, and I'm fishing 4 inches over depth. And that's it, guys. Like I said, I'm going to leave the baited area for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and then we'll get on it. I'll get the feeder out again while I'm waiting and see if we can nab one of these stunning roach. Right guys, it's now time to check the sliding float line. I'm just starting off with a couple of live red maggots, size 16 hook. It's been 50 minutes since I've pre-baited, so hopefully there should be some fish moved in. And the kind of cast that you're doing with the slider is, it's not an aggressive cast like you would normally with a waggler float, because you're trying to punch it out. It's a nice smooth cast with a little bit of power, but you've not got that final punch that you would normally have. With a waggler float. And that's perfect. So you cast out beyond your feed line, wind in on how many turns you've chosen to bring your float towards you, and that's the key to casting and consistency. Is you cast beyond your feed, you bring your float into your feed by how many turns you've decided, which by bringing the float towards you, that allows you to sink the line. There's a slight breeze, not much, but it's enough to shift the float if your line's not sunk. And that's the important reason. You decide how many turns you're going to take to sink your line, and then you let your line back out, the weight goes to the bottom, and that's your desired distance. In my case, it's about 7 turns of the reel after hitting the clip, and that's my distance that I'm going to be fishing, which is roughly about 27 metres. I'm just going to shift that. Slight breeze coming from right to left, so I'm going to cast slightly right to target. Hit the clip, rod tip in the water, 7 turns, let line off, float pops up, the weight's going down, and then it starts to settle. And as I said, I'm probably about 4 inches over depth. And another thing you want to try and do when you pick your area is just have several casts, on about 3 or 4 square metres, just to make sure there's no big differences in depth. You want quite a flat spot, just so that you've got consistency, so if you're right or left to target, you know that your bait's going to be on the bottom. And the reason you cast to the clip is, obviously you've got quite a bit of weight on your line, with your Olivettes or whatever it is you use. You might use Swan Shot, SSGs, and once that line hits the clip, the bait then follows and turns over behind the float. If your float doesn't settle properly, then you know that you're in a bit of a tangle and your weight's not gone to the bottom properly, or it's wrapped around your float, or something's not quite right. But normally when you're cast out and you see your float going through the air, if it goes through nice and straight, then you roughly know it's going to land, it's going to settle okay. If it's all twisted through the air like a sort of spiral, then 9 times out of 10 it won't settle properly and you'll be in a tangle. And it's important to keep in touch with your float, because obviously you're fishing quite a bit of distance away from you, and if your float goes under, then you want to be able to have a good positive strike. Obviously your float can go 1 or 2 ways. It can be pulled straight under, nice positive bite, or you could get a lift bite, and obviously I've got the 4 number 8s Stots, just above my hook link, and if they get lifted then my float's going to lift up, you know, a good sort of inch or so, which is another indication of a bite. If there was fish there, the float would go straight away, which happened on the last session. I think I'll go back to the feeder. Go back to the feeder for 10-15 minutes, a couple of casts with that, and then come back to this. I know for a fact there's going to be fish moving in, but there's plenty of ground bait out there. Obviously no indications just now means there's not been any fish at it. There's no way they would have consumed that in 50 minutes without getting any indications just now that there's still fish hanging about. So no point in putting any more ground bait down. I'm just going to leave that, like I said, 10-15 minutes, have a couple of casts with the feeder. Well, it's a long time coming, guys, getting one on the slider throat, and then I got one on the feeder virtually at the same time. So now that I got one on the feeder line, I think I'll try there again, bring the feeder in. So now, even though it's a really good stamp of fish, and we'll try the float line now. Since we got something there, hopefully they've moved in. Got a bite straight away nearly. Yeah, the fish are in closer now. Excellent. So good seeing that float slip below the surface. A little bit smaller than we were getting on the feeder, but it's early days. Oh, this is a nice fish. Fish on. Oh, stunning fish. Absolutely beautiful. I'm so impressed with the stamp of roach today and the last session as well. It's just phenomenal. You know, there's people in the rest of the UK just, you know, they dream about catching roach that size. Especially on a wild venue. And, you know, what better way to do it than on the float. Slider floats, such an effective method. This feels nice. Yeah, this is definitely the last one, ending on a nice pound fish. I think we'll take you around the other side. I say it's not the biggest, it's probably one of the biggest today. Lovely fish. Perfect way to end the day. Guys, I really have had a fantastic session today, and it's really only been a short session. Didn't start fishing till 2 o'clock. Started on the feeder and had some fantastic roach. Good stamp of fish today, as always on Loch Lomond. You know, perfect.